Hello, welcome back to Game of the Week. I'm Jonathan,
I'm Sofia.
and we're going to go over the game between Nathan Hoover and Donahue Robert. Okay, the game starts off with a Caro-Kann advanced variation, and now here, instead of bishop f5, we have the second most common move, c5. White takes, it's the main line so far, e6 threatening the pawn, bishop e3 defending, knight c6, attacking this pawn, but the main move, one of the main moves here is actually knight to d7, so you can fork both of the pawns. But black chooses knight c6, slight tiny inaccuracy, but not too important. Knight f3, queen c7, and here attacking this pawn, and now white is able to stop the threat with the bishop b5 pin. Bishop d7, renewing the threat on the pawn. Now we have to take that to keep the pawn advantage. Knight c3, so far developing, simple developing moves. Knight f5, and now this is an important move over here. In the game, white played queen to d2, but it was slightly inaccurate.
Yeah, what should have been played was b4, because you'll notice that that pawn could no longer be attacked after that. But queen d2 allows queen a5, and you can still win the pawn. There's no more b4.
Yeah, so b4 right away would have kept the pawn, but here black had the chance to win it back, and there was no way to defend it. However, in the game, black chooses to play d4, forking the two pieces. Now white has to take, and after this, the idea was castle's queenside, putting pressure on this knight, opening the rook, opening the bishop, and now both pawns are under attack.
Yeah, and once again, you can still play the move b4 and solidify that pawn, which is what he did. So right now, it's not really too much of a danger because
well, so on the game, black played b6, but yes, you're defending this pawn with b4, but this pawn's hanging. So what happens if black decides to take? How do you solve the issue of this pin and your knight being attacked?
Yeah, so here you can actually just take on knight c6, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the queen is attacked, so not really a problem.
Well, yeah, so let's go a little bit. So after knight takes e6, you get rid of your pin, but after b takes, you could play this move queen to e1, keeping the defense on this knight. But there's a cool line here that the computer gives that if white plays queen to e2, giving up this knight for this queen to a6 check.
It's a juicy a6 square, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then after king to b8, there's a couple moves, but one of them is b5, and this just opens up the entire king for black, and it's pretty much impossible to defend because moves like c6 are coming with threatening checkmate on b7 and the bishop, and of course the open file later on is just deadly. So that would be a cool variation if black took that pawn. But as a human, you could see that taking this pawn just allows some sort of tactic, and you don't really look too much into it. But that's what could have happened. Okay, instead black plays b6, trying to destabilize the pawn structure. Takes. And now we have this move a3, which what it does, it defends this hanging pawn on b4. A3 is not a bad move, but there was another option here to defend. But white could have played this move knight c to e2, defending this pawn.
And you'll notice that that e pawn is still hanging. So if the queen takes, though, after that you have queen c3, and there's just way too much stuff on that bishop. Right? Even if knight takes, we got this cool line, and you just win the bishop. Okay, we went all the way back. Okay, my bad.
Okay. Yeah. So that was the end of the game. But let's go back here. So after this, in this line with knight c to e2, if takes, you have to play queen c3, which just wins the bishop. But then in this line, taking here doesn't work anymore because after black takes and you take, white does lose this knight here, and it's not as good. So instead, queen c3 just simply wins the bishop. Okay, so knight c2 e2 would have been another option, but a3 is not a bad move either.
And now we have a bit of a mistake, but we can see his idea was bishop to a8.
Yeah, black plays bishop to a8, which is slight. Well, it does give up a lot of advantage here, uh, but there was one very tricky way that the computer finds to give black a lot of counterplay options. And let's see.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it would have just been to play f6, which is hard to see when you're getting attacked on that side because it's just such a small pawn move. But the idea is after f4, right, defending this pawn, you can play g5. And let's say the queen comes to try to aid on this side. There's this really cool line where everything is traded and you've got your rook on g8, which at least gives you a little bit of counterplay as black, because if you just sit there as white, Rex just rips open your queen side. It's not very good, but so this at least gives you some counterplay. Of course, you still have four pawns, so it's not great, but it's something.
Yeah, so in this very weird computer line, yeah, black does sacrifice an exchange just to open up the pawn structure and get the rook and all his pieces active, which is very, very hard to see. But that would have been one of the only ways to keep some chances of counterplay. Of course, bishop a8 is reasonable with the idea of after the attack on the queen, you'll line up and create this battery to create a checkmate threat. Of course, white defends with f3. Now black chooses to take the bishop to e7. Now developing his last piece, and as you'll see, preparing some counterplay.
Yeah, so here c3 was played, but you could just be more straight up and play c4. So the idea was just supposed to stabilize this knight. But really, you want to try to open things up here, right? So you can get your rooks to come to the same file that the king is on.
Yeah, so c3 was a slow move that was played, but yeah, you can play faster with c4, for example. c3 just defends this pawn to prepare a4, a5, but yeah, I mean, when you're stabilized in your position and black doesn't have any threats and no real plan to do, you can play slow moves like c3, and it's perfectly fine. But there's actually a more interesting tactical move over here that white could have played.
Yeah, so white would have played knight c5, and you can see they're threatening the fork. First of all, this right can't be taken because of the fork over here. Just there are a lot of different tactics going on, right? And let's say the rook moves up here, right? You've still got knight takes e7, and just this fork again. It's just a big problem.
Yeah, so
It's
the
very
rook,
cool to see.
yeah, so yeah, the rook's attacked, and if you move it, then after taking here, there's a fork on the queen, and if, for example, you move the rook this way, after takes, again, this is the same problem. So if you take with the queen, there's this line with queen to b6, and now you can see that all the squares are getting taken away and the knight is entering, and this would be just a much more conclusive end to the game. So knight c6 would have been a much cleaner and quicker shot. But c3 still keeps the advantage, and we'll have a nice game.
Yeah, everything is pretty much good here, though. Just black has nothing to do on that side.
Okay, king b8. I guess stopping the knight from coming in. So if knight c6, queen takes, there's no knight a7, getting out of the fork, possibly. a4, continuing the attack.
And g5 is just a last desperate attempt to open up that side of the queen side.
Yeah, the king side. So the point is that black has nothing to do over here, so he needs to find something to do, and the one way to try to create some sort of counterplay is on this battery and trying to open up lines for your rooks. And it's a good try. Now, here white plays this move, rook to f2, which the idea is to defend this pawn, so if g4 takes, then there's no queen takes g2 checkmate. But in fact, this move didn't even need to be played, because let's for a second actually play out black's threats. So g4, okay, then g takes f3, still no big threat, because if f2 you take with the rook, and if f takes, then you just move the rook, and there's no clear threat. So in fact, you can actually ignore this, and you can play your own attack.
Yeah, so in the meantime, you can just play a5, and no matter if they just continue with g4, they're like, okay, I'm going to continue on. I'm going to try to take here maybe, right? After a6, you're just, white has all the threats here. c4 is also very nice, because you'll notice that if the queen takes this, your rook is just entering, right? Sacrificing that pawn, but it's no problems. There are just too many pieces over there. You've got this checkmate coming as well, rook c7.
Yeah, so the point, if you just ignore black's plan and you continue with your own threats, your attacking moves come in with so many tempos that black doesn't even have time to make any sort of threats at all. Okay, but rook f3 is still not losing or giving up the advantage, but just something to point out. Okay, black is trying to prepare opening this up and white is trying to prevent it. Now h5. Now it's very hard to prevent the opening up of the files with g4, so now white continues the attack with a5. Okay, g4, a6, attacking the queen, queen to d7. Again, if queen to d5, we might have some of the same tricks with c4 and rook c2 and a7 and all the variations we looked at. Okay, queen d7, a7, king c8. Okay, there's nowhere for the pawn to go, so far black's a little bit safe. Now let's see what happens on the king side. Takes, and white takes this f7 pawn with rook takes. That's one of the few moves, the few good moves that white has. Okay, no real problems here. Queen to d5, renewing the mate threat since the rook left.
And there was actually no need for rook to f2 to be played again, but as a human,
rook. This time you do need to stop the mate. Even queen g3 and rook f2 are some of the only moves right now. So this time it was kind of important. And after takes, luckily this queen can take. And now even though this rook opened up, here with the attack with 3 pieces attacking. There's 3 defenders of this pawn, 1, 2, 3. 3 attackers, 3 defenders, so everything is safe so far.
Yeah, now he brings the bishop in, but this bishop can't really be taken because then you have too many, you just have too many attackers on that pawn.
Yeah, so bishop h4 attacks one of the defenders of this, and if you take it, you leave your own defense of this. So, no problems though. Rook e2, just stepping out of the way, and there doesn't seem to be a clear way to continue. Black tries rook g6, preparing to double the rooks and defending this pawn against possible queen trades into a winning endgame. Okay, so what do we do about this plan? Well, you gotta start attacking. Keep your attacking moves going so that there's no time for doubling up. So now, of course, if queen takes c4, actually I'll play it, queen takes c4, there's moves like rook c2, pinning the queen to the king. Okay, in the game, black decides to sacrifice the queen for 2 pieces. But let's see what happens if the queen moved back. For example, if queen to d7, now we have this move knight to d6, the rook can't take it anymore. And after king c7 only move, we can bring the other knight in. All the squares are being taken away. And after king c6
comes in.
And that's checkmate. Okay, well, what about queen to b7? That's the only other safe square for the queen. Then we have knight takes e6.
Yeah, the queen's got
and this pawn's still defended. Now there's discovered attacks. There's knight c5 threats. There's knight takes d8 threats. There's knight e6 threats. And it's just too much to handle. Okay, so black decides to sacrifice the queen for 2 pieces and hope that there's some sort of counterplay on this pawn.
Yeah, so now white's job is just to kind of uncoordinate those pieces. So c5 was played.
Yeah, c5 continuing the attack, trying to open up the king. b5 keeping the files closed. c6. Now this is a nice move because it shuts off this bishop and any further threats on the pawn. Even if the rook doubles, there's no more bishop. And if the bishop takes, you can at least just promote to a queen and win the bishop. And simplify into a much more easily winning position. King c7, queen c3. Now the way for white to win is to try to get the queen somewhere inside and attack some things like this pawn, create some checks, attack this bishop. So queen c3 achieves that pretty quickly.
Now black is still trying to just get those pieces connected, but it's really hard. That bishop on a is just dead. The rooks aren't even connected enough to make a threat on the king. The rook on g4 is just trying to basically hang on to that dark squared bishop in case it gets attacked at any point, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay. White continues in the infiltration with queen to c5. Rook d5 is played. Yeah, there's not too much else for black to do. This attempts to hold on to this pawn, but of course the queen can jump in, attacking this bishop. So rook d8 defending that, and now queen to f7 check. Very, very nice check, attacking the king and trying to take this pawn on e6. For example, if king takes, queen takes c6 is
Got a very nice
an
fork,
easy
yeah.
fork. So king to b6 is played instead.
And now c7.
And then c7, which attacks the rook and renews the fork on the king and the rook. So multiple threats.
Yeah, and what's really nice is once that rook, even if that, no matter how much that rook moves, that you make a queen, you're always, you can never really take this because you're still always threatening this fork. So just took on g2. And what was really nice is that at the end of this, black doesn't really have that many checks. There's only like one.
Yeah, there's only one check on f2, and this queen covers it. And after all the exchanges, you're just up too many pieces, and rook a6 is coming with checkmate. So seeing this, black ended up resigning the game, and Nathan won a very nice, crazy attacking game. So congratulations to him. All right, that's our recap for Game of the Week. Thanks for watching.